Dear coalition members, dear friends of the coalition, as I think back to the birth of our Hungarian American Coalition 30 years ago, I remember the tremendous excitement we felt then, not only at the actual founding of the organization, but more about hearing and reading about the almost unbelievable changes in our homeland. Our beloved Hungary was finally a free country. In 1989, 1990, that seemed to be a miracle. The small group of Hungarian American leaders who gathered in the Washington area to discuss how our community could help Hungary transform into a democratic, free market society recognized the need for a new organization. Reverend Imre Bertalan, Zsoltán Szabolcs Szekeres, Gyula Várajai, Sándor Taraszovics, Árpád Kovács, August Molnár, Paul Teleki, Edward Császár, Frank Koszorús Jr., Paul Fekete, and some others. They all wanted to build a coalition of equal partners, hence our name, to pull together under one umbrella as many of the effective, active organizations as possible. We also recognize that building a viable organization must have the support of individual members. Thus, on August 20th, 1991, 15 organizations and 5 individuals formally registered the Hungarian American Coalition in Washington. What were our goals? First, to identify and promote the concerns of the Hungarian American community. Second, to protect and preserve human and minority rights and the cultural heritage of Hungarians. Third, to support democratic institutions and economic development in Hungary. And fourth, to encourage cultural and educational interaction between the people of the U.S. and Hungary. We established an Office of Communication in Washington where the Szekeres brothers, Szabolcs, Zsolt, and János, gave us a room in their offices on Connecticut Avenue, just 2 blocks from the White House, until we raised enough money to pay them rent. Even as a fledgling volunteer organization with very little funding, in those first years we undertook many projects. We sponsored a 6-part Hungary, a video history. We assisted with the multi-city Kolozsvár Collegium choir tour. We published a directory of U.S. university programs where Hungarian university students could come and study. We started a White House internship program and often hosted visitors in Washington from Hungary, Romania, Slovakia, and Vojvodina. We worked hand in hand with László Hámos, Emes Alatkóci, and Bulcsú Veres of the Hungarian Human Rights Foundation in calling attention to human rights violations of the Hungarian communities in those countries. In 1995, we co-sponsored a full-day conference with the Potomac Foundation entitled Promoting European Security and Integration, the Role of National Minorities. In that conference, a comparison of minority rights of the Catalans of Spain and the Rato-Romansh of Switzerland with those of Hungarian communities in Slovakia, Romania, Subcarpathia, and Vojvodina offered a huge contrast. Together with member organizations, we held human rights workshops in Cleveland, San Francisco, Hartford, Pittsburgh, and elsewhere to inform and train young Hungarian Americans about human rights in general and the rights of Hungarians in particular. László Hámos, András Ludányi, Géza Kádár, Frank Koszorús were some of the instructors at those workshops. At the Hartford workshop, I met for the first time an outstanding young man, Max Teleki, who would end up serving as president of the coalition a decade later. In 1992, we joined a group called the Central and Eastern European Coalition that claimed to speak for 20 million U.S. citizens that come from a Central European background. President Clinton and Vice President Gore's foreign policy strategy was to assure stability in Europe through a revitalized NATO alliance with rapid membership for the Visegrad countries. Between 1994 and 1997, members of our coalition were invited to 5 meetings on NATO expansion with President Clinton and/or Vice President Gore, Sandy Berger, Deputy Assistant to the President for National Security, and Strobe Talbot, Deputy Secretary of State, and my favorite State Department person, Daniel Fried, who was Director of East Central Europe for the NSC Council. Peter Újvági, a councilman in Toledo, was instrumental in establishing a close contact and a close working relationship between the coalition and the White House. In 1994, in an especially memorable meeting, Strobe Talbot, who was known as a real Russophile, he served in Russia, said to the 20 Central Eastern European representatives, and I was there to hear this, the question is, what kind of Russia will we have in the 21st century? You feel Russia will revert to type and foresee a dangerous scenario. We see Russia more positively and do not want to undercut those forces that want to build a benign democratic system. His comment was greeted by a stunned silence. Then Jan Nowak, the highly respected elderly leader of the Polish American Congress, stood up and said, "Why did you invite us here if you do not want to accept our opinion? And what will happen if we are right, Mr. Secretary, and you are wrong?" Jan is long gone, but his words were prophetic. In 1997, in order to inform the Hungarian public before a referendum on NATO membership, the coalition held conferences in 3 Hungarian cities, Budapest, Debrecen, and Miskolc, entitled Hungary in an Expanded NATO, Benefits and Responsibilities. Many experts and officials were invited to speak at the extremely well-attended conferences, and Joseph Bader accompanied us in our small group in each city. In the November, and Zsolt, of course, was there directing the whole thing from behind. In the November referendum, 85% of Hungarian voters favored NATO membership. And in 1999, Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic became members of NATO. Although the NATO conferences gave us high visibility, every project we organized affected our thinking. We had the opportunity to meet and work with heroic, outstanding people on their trips to the U.S. Bishop László Tőkés, Miklós Durai, András Sütő, Sándor Csóri, László Dobos, Sándor Sára, Imre Pozsgai, just to mention a few. In the spring of 1991, Transylvanian Bishop Kálmán Csiha visited the U.S. He brought first-hand information of the genuine needs of Hungarian Transylvanian schools, which were systematically confiscated by the Romanian government. Together with his niece, someone we all know, Nádas Kuni, they made a plan to establish a system of godparenting involving Hungarian Americans as sponsors to support the education of young Hungarians in Transylvania, as well as to fund the rebirth of the Hungarian educational system in Romania. This is one of the most successful and long-standing programs in our community, one in which many coalition members participated. I am truly glad to be able to say that in 2000, after a lot of behind-the-scenes work by the coalition and others, the 450-year-old building of the Kolozsvár Reformed Collegium was finally returned to its rightful owners. Through the years, our coalition always tried to develop a good working relationship with both U.S. and Hungarian ambassadors. Once we were invited to the State Department and asked by the newly named U.S. ambassador whom we would recommend to serve as Deputy Chief of Mission. So many people wanted to be posted to Hungary, he said, that he really needed our help. Zsolt Szekeres named the person without hesitation, and he was soon appointed. As the coalition celebrates its 30th anniversary, there are so many friendships, so many supportive relationships to list. George Pogan and Géza Kádár became fast friends in Budapest in 1989, just as communism fell. They have served as the secretary and legal advisor, respectively, at the coalition, and George and Sandy are here with us tonight. Many Hungarian consuls joined us, among them Helen Szabja, László Bőtös, Eugene Megyesi, Csilla Grauser, Eva Voesen, Kathy Prierman, and others. the MBK Hungarian Communion of Friends, the Cleveland Hungarian Heritage Society, who is our generous host tonight, the Magyar Club of Chicago, and many others have played integral parts in our projects and development. I am truly grateful for the financial support of those who made our many projects possible. The Hungary Foundation, the Charles and Lisa Simonyi Fund, Dr. Charles Simonyi, the Pannonius Foundation, Centene Charitable Foundation, Emerita, the Doris Buffett Foundation, and many, many generous individual donors. I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling that our lives have been greatly enriched by serving a common cause greater than ourselves. In the past 30 years, together with my husband John, we traveled often and much to Hungarian inhabited regions and were truly inspired by the many people we met. Even after 30 years, much work remains to be done. I'm deeply grateful for the privilege of having been part of the coalition, and I'm genuinely proud that my daughter, Andrea, continues to build the organization into the future.